Hi, I'm Ting Zhang. This is how to analyze PX cycle 2 data using SRV. This section is about gap analysis. So gap is most popular analysis within the PX. It's a t-test that allow you to compare two groups in terms of one statistics. So the statistics can be the mean scores, subgroup percentages, proficiency level percentages, or percentiles. So one key point here is when you compare two groups within a country and within one cycle, you cannot assume the t-test is independent. Why? All right, so let's have to go back to the sampling design section that you will find Paul talked about. So for many countries participated in the PIAC assessment, so their sampling design is multi-stage and clustered sampling. What does that mean? That means that for many countries, usually they select a huge, a great number of huge clusters first. For example, cities, towns, or neighborhoods. So then within those clusters, they select individuals. This design lead to a problem. That is, the individuals selected from the same clusters are all alike each other. So this create covariance between the group estimates. So that means when we do the t-test, we have to use this variance estimation formula, which not only take care of the variance between two groups, you also need to take care of the covariance between the two groups. All right, so how to do that? Packages like AdSurvey handle this correctly. They combine the plausible values with replicate weights using the jackknife replicate method, such as BRR, and then carry the covariance between groups into the t-test. And if you really want to comparing two independent samples, for example, two countries or two cycles, there are options that can allow you to treat the covariance as 0. But for standard between group analysis within one country and within one cycle, keep the covariance. All right, for more information about the methodology, look into the SRE user guide. All right, so what we usually do with a gap analysis, we can do comparisons within cycles or within years. For example, we can compare females to males for the cycle 2 data. And we can compare Germany to USA using the cycle 2 data. We can even compare the subgroups between countries. For example, the gender gap between countries within cycle 2. This last analysis is also called gap in gap. However, there's one caveat I want you to pay attention to. That is, if you want to compare between cycles, comparing cycle 2 to cycle 1, because the mode changed. Cycle 2 are fully digital, and the cycle 1 is like hybrid, using both paper-based and digital-based assessment. So there's a mode difference between the two cycles. A linking arrow need to be applied in the comparisons according to OECD standard methodology. For SRV, we haven't yet baked in the linking arrow. So stay tuned for the next release of the SRV. For now, I'm going to show you how to do the comparison within year. All right. So let's look at an example here. So we want to compare the employment status regarding the participants' literacy performance. So SRV uses gap function, and it has, again, three important arguments. First of all, you need to define your outcome. In our case, we want the literacy scale. So, and then we need to provide our data object. Here is a Germany data. And then we need to define our groups. So in this case, I want to use the employment status variable C2 sub D05. And I set my group A as employed and my group B as unemployed. So by default, gap, this function will treat the group A as a reference variable, reference level. And if you want to change, we have an option that allow you to do that. I'll talk this later. So let's look at how to run it in the RStudio. All right, so within the RStudio, open your the PIAC training script. To follow me, you need to go to 141 or around this number. Find this example, and let's run it. Okay, let me clean my previous run. All right. Okay, so the gap function actually is going to give you a lot of information. If you just print the results, you can see it has 4 chunks. So the first chunk is about a summary of this run, and then the second chunk is about the numbers used in the analysis. And the third run is probably pretty helpful. It's a percentage of each group and the comparisons if you're interested in doing that. So it shows you about 74% of group A in Germany, which is employed people in German sample, and about 2% of the people are unemployed. So the difference between these two groups is about 72 percentage point. And then there's some covariance, and we can compare the gap with the standard error take into account. So finally, we can see according to the p-value here, the percentages are significantly different. But we want to see the means, right? So let's look at the final results. So for the group A, all right, so for the group A, the employment group, their literacy scores are about 276. And our group B, unemployed, their scores is about 241. The difference is about 35 point. So there's a covariance between the two groups, and then we find that the p-value in terms of the difference between their mean scores are significantly different. Right, so this is within group comparison. Let's look at, all right, so this is comparison within a year, within a country. So let's look at more examples. All right, so how about the comparison between countries? So in this case, we have to use a different function like taught by Paul in the previous sections. So what we need to do is we need to reading each country's data separately and combine them using this survey data frame list. And here's how you do that. Once you're reading the Germany data and the US data, and you can provide the labels for each country. So alternatively, you can reading two countries' data at once using the read PAC functions. You just need to specify your countries. In this case, I reverse the order, see the US first and the Germany later. So we're going to use this list to do the analysis. All right. So in this gap analysis, we want to compare the US with Germany in terms of their numeracy scores. So here's my call. So after I run analysis, remember, if you just print out the results, it's going to be a lot. So instead, you can use a $sign to print the last section only. So here's a result from the last sections. So you can see the US, which actually is a reference group. So achieve a score around 249. Germany, on the other hand, is 273, which looks higher than the US, right? And let's say the difference between these two. So there is about a 24 score point difference between the US and Germany. And we can see that the p-value shows the difference are significant. And I want to point out one thing you should pay attention to. So because the sample are independently drawn from two countries, they're not the same survey. So the covariance is 0. So as survey treated correctly, so you'll find that actually the covariance between the two groups is 0. And it also indicated because the survey recognize they're not the same survey. All right, so in this example, we have the US as a reference group. We can change the reference group. This also applied for the subgroup within country comparisons. Just use this argument called reference data index. So in our case, we changed it to 2, means we wanted the second group as a reference group. And once we run analysis and print the results, we find that even though the list is still US the first, Germany later on, but we can see the comparison results reversed. So here it treated Germany as a reference group. So we can also do comparison of subgroup between countries. So in this case, we used most of the settings from the previous call, except we need to define our subgroups. So we still have our country data list, but we bring in 2 subgroups. For the group A, we use gender. So we treat males as group A and females as group B. And then after we run, we print out the results. Again, the results going to be a lot. So just look at this. I just want to highlight a few outcomes to interpret that for you. So first of all, I'm interested in gender gap within each country. So what I'm going to look. So I will look at the diff AB. So for the US, this line, there's about 8 score difference between males and females. And for the Germany, the gender gap is about 12. And those gender gap, if we look at the p-values, they are significant for each country. But how about the gender gap? If we compare the gender gap between countries, how's the gender gap of US compare with Germany? And let's look at the results. Let's see, we need to find the results ABAB. So diff ABAB shows that the gender gap of US is lower than the German gender gap. Is about 4.5 points lower. If we look at the p-value, however, we find that the p-value is not significant. So that's a comparison gap in gap. All right, you can play with gap functions with these instructions. All right, to summarize, the survey gap analysis allow you to compare groups in terms of different statistics, mean, percentages, achievement level percentages, percentiles. And if you want to know more about how to do that, look into the survey user guide. So for the comparison types, you can do within year, which I just show you in these sections, and you can do between years. However, for the PIAC, we need to incorporate the linking arrow, so stay tuned, or you can bake your own linking arrow in the analysis if you are really and statistic savvy.